A boy was protecting twin babies from the bitter cold under the snow when a billionaire opened the door to his mansion and came upon a secret that broke his heart. The wind cut like blades through Jack's thin jacket. His small hands, red and numb, clutched the precious bundle to his chest. Sarah and Sophie, each 6 months old, wrapped together in a single worn blanket. A snowflake landed on Sophie's nose, causing her to squirm and let out a weak whimper. "Shh, it's okay, sis." His 5-year-old voice trembled as he tried to brush the snow off his sister's face using his chin. His hands couldn't loosen the grip holding the twins close. "It's okay." That was a lie. Nothing was okay. The sky was darkening quickly, turning the snowstorm into an even more threatening monster. Sarah began to cry, a high-pitched sound piercing the night like a knife. Sophie, as usual, joined in just seconds later. The twins' cries echoed down the empty street, carried by the wind like a plea for help that no one would answer. Jack bit his lip, trying not to cry as well. His arms trembled from the effort of carrying them. How much did a 6-month-old weigh? And 2 of them, before it hadn't seemed like much, but now, a stumble. His heart raced as he fought to keep his balance. The snow was already up to his knees, making each step a battle. The legs of his jeans, soaked and freezing, felt as heavy as lead. "I'm sorry," he whispered to his sisters when he had to stop to catch his breath. I'm sorry." Sarah coughed, a harsh sound that made his blood run colder than the wind. She was icy to the touch, her lips starting to take on a bluish color that left him terrified. Sophie wasn't much better. Her crying was getting weaker and weaker. The last bottle had run out hours ago. The powdered formula, too. In the battered backpack he carried on his back, there were only 2 clean diapers left and a single lone sock. Jack could no longer feel his toes in his soaked sneakers. A stronger gust made him stagger backwards. The twins screamed in unison, sensing his fear. Jack clenched his teeth, planted his feet in the snow and refused to fall. He couldn't fall. If he fell now, that's when he saw it. First, only a shadow through the white curtain of snow. Then its outlines grew clearer. A stone-gray mansion rose against the night sky like a fairy tale castle. Enormous windows glowed with golden light, promising warmth and safety. His legs wobbled, threatening to give out. The mansion looked so close and yet so impossibly far at the same time. Sarah hiccuped against his chest, her tiny body shaking from the cold. Sophie had stopped crying, and that frightened him more than anything else. "Just a bit more." His voice was barely a hoarse whisper. "We're almost there." Each step was a war against the wind and snow. His arms burned, protesting the weight of the twins. The world began to spin at the edges of his vision, dark spots dancing like black butterflies. The mansion's front steps appeared before him, a mountain of ice-crusted steps. Jack lifted his foot onto the first step. His legs threatened to collapse. The second step was even worse. On the third, his knees nearly buckled. "Sarah, Sophie," he whispered their names like a prayer. "Sarah, Sophie." Tears started to run down, freezing on his face before reaching his chin. His arms trembled so much he had to hold his sisters even tighter to his chest. They looked so small, so fragile, so quiet now. By the time he reached the top of the stairway, his legs were like jelly. The massive oak door loomed before him, like the entrance to a fortress. Through the frosted glass panels, he could see movement, shadows dancing in the warm light. Jack stumbled to the door, his last steps more of a controlled fall than a walk. Sophie was no longer moving in his arms. Sarah had stopped crying. Panic clutched at his throat as he forced one trembling hand toward the doorbell. His frozen fingers stopped inches from the golden button. What if the people inside were bad? What if they called the police? What if they tried to separate him from the twins? A sob escaped his chapped lips. He had no choice left. There was no more time. Summoning his last ounce of strength, he pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed, deep and solemn, while Jack fell to his knees in the snow, still clutching his sisters with what little strength his 5-year-old arms could muster. Flakes of snow swirled around them, covering the 3 siblings like a cold cloak as heavy footsteps approached on the other side of the door. Robert Thompson hated being interrupted during his nightly ritual of brandy and reading. The chime of the doorbell echoed through the empty mansion, making him frown over the pages of his book. Who could it be at this hour, especially in a storm like this? His first instinct was to ignore it. The security in the gated community shouldn't have let anyone in under this weather. But something, maybe the desperate, insistent ring, made him mark his page and get up from his leather armchair. He crossed the entrance hall with heavy steps, irritated at having to abandon the warmth of his study. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. For a moment he thought he heard crying, but it must have been just the wind. His large hand seized the brass doorknob, turning it with a brusque twist. The icy wind blew in immediately, bringing with it a flurry of snow, and Robert froze. There, collapsed on his knees at the doorway, was a boy. He couldn't be older than 5. His small face was red and stained with frozen tears, his lips purple and trembling violently. But that wasn't what made Robert's heart skip a beat. In the boy's arms, pressed to his chest like a priceless treasure, were 2 babies, twins, from the looks of it. Their tiny faces were frighteningly pale, aside from the bluish patches on their lips and around their eyes. Please," the boy's voice was barely a hoarse whisper. Robert's initial shock lasted only a fraction of a second. In his 15 years as an emergency room surgeon, before retiring to manage the family business, he had learned to turn surprise into immediate action. "Get in, right now." His commanding tone echoed through the hall. When the boy tried to stand and stumbled, Robert didn't hesitate. In a swift movement, he took the 2 babies from his arms. "Can you walk?" The boy nodded faintly, but his legs shook so badly he could barely stand. Robert cursed under his breath. "Margaret," he called over his shoulder, his voice booming through the mansion. "Margaret!" Quick footsteps echoed in the corridor, and a middle-aged woman with graying hair appeared in the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on an apron. "For the love of God, Mr. Thompson, why all the shouting?" Her words died in her throat when she saw the scene. "Good heavens! Prepare the downstairs guest room. Turn on all the heaters. I need warm towels, extra blankets, and—" He quickly examined the babies in his arms. "Warm milk. Hurry." Margaret vanished without a word. Robert turned to the boy, who was still trembling violently in the foyer. "What's your name, son?" "J-Jack." The boy's teeth chattered so badly he could barely get the words out. "All right, Jack." "Are these your sisters?" Another faint nod. "How old are they?" 6 months." Jack wobbled again, and Robert realized he was about to pass out. "Alan!" he bellowed again. A tall, lean man, dressed in a chauffeur's uniform, appeared at once. "Take the boy carefully." Alan moved with surprising agility for his age, scooping Jack up before he collapsed. The boy tried to protest weakly, his arms reaching toward the twins. "No, please, I can't leave them." "It's all right, son." Robert's voice softened considerably. "I'm a doctor. I'll look after your sisters. Trust me." Something in his tone must have convinced Jack, because he finally relaxed in Alan's arms, his eyes closing from utter exhaustion. "Take him to the downstairs guest room," Robert ordered as he walked briskly toward the living room, where a fireplace kept the area comfortably warm. "And bring my medical kit from the office." The babies in his arms weren't moving, and that alarmed him more than anything else. 15 years in emergency medicine had taught him that quiet babies were rarely a good sign. With precise motions, he laid them on the Persian rug in front of the fireplace. His experienced fingers checked their vital signs: weak pulses, but present, shallow breathing, dangerously low body temperature. Margaret returned, rushing in with a pile of warm towels and blankets. "The guest room is ready, sir. The milk is heating." "Good. Help me here." He began to remove the twins' wet clothes gently. "We need to warm them gradually. Doing it too fast can cause shock." As they worked, Robert couldn't help but notice the signs: worn-out clothes, makeshift diapers, marks of neglect. These children hadn't seen a doctor or proper care in some time. Alan came back with his medical kit, and Robert began a more thorough examination, while Margaret wrapped the babies in the warm towels. "How's the boy?" "He's sleeping, sir. I changed his wet clothes and put him under heated blankets, like you always recommend for hypothermia cases." Robert nodded, satisfied. 15 years working together had taught his team well. One of the twins, the smaller one, started to let out a weak cry. It was the most welcome sound Robert had heard in a long time. "That's it, little one. Keep fighting," he muttered, checking her pupils with a small flashlight. "Margaret, the milk?" "I'll get it right now, sir." While he examined the second baby, who was also starting to show signs of life, Robert's mind raced. A 5-year-old wandering in the snow with 2 6-month-olds, no documents, no identification, clearly running away from something or someone. As a doctor, he was legally required to notify the authorities. The smaller twin grabbed his finger with surprising strength, and he felt something in his chest, something he hadn't felt since he'd lost his own family, so many years ago. "What's the protocol for a situation like this, sir?" Alan asked softly, as though reading his thoughts. Robert looked at the babies, now beginning to regain some color thanks to the warmth of the fire. He thought about the boy, sleeping after who knew how long trekking through a blizzard with his sisters, clinging to a desperate act of courage. "The protocol, Alan," he finally answered, his voice steady, "is that these children need at least 24 hours of medical observation before any decisions are made. Moving them right now would be dangerous." Alan gave a slight smile. "Yes, sir, absolutely correct from a medical standpoint." Margaret reappeared with 2 bottles of warmed milk. While helping to feed the babies, Robert was already making plans. The downstairs guest room would need to be adapted. They would need clothes, diapers, supplies, and he'd need to conduct a more complete exam on all 3 as soon as possible. "Margaret, make a list. First thing tomorrow morning. When the stores open." "I'll take care of it, sir," she smiled, her eyes shining in a way he hadn't seen in years. These little ones need everything. The Thompson mansion, silent for so long, seemed to awaken from a long hibernation, and Robert, observing the babies eagerly drinking their bottles while his staff moved around with renewed purpose, felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The gentle morning light filtered through the curtains in the guest room, where Jack watched his sisters sleeping peacefully in an improvised crib. Their tiny hands gripped the soft blanket, so different from the worn cloth that had protected them the previous night. The boy didn't take his eyes off them, afraid they might disappear if he blinked. Robert entered the room quietly, carrying a tray with hot chocolate and cookies. He observed the small figure on the armchair next to the crib for a moment, legs dangling above the floor. He looked even smaller now, wearing borrowed pajamas Margaret had found somewhere in the mansion. "You need to eat," Robert said gently, setting the tray on the small table. "Your sisters are fine, sleeping like angels." Jack nodded but kept his gaze on the babies. They're really okay now. They'll be fine. They're strong little girls." Robert pulled up another armchair and sat next to him. "Just like you." A faint smile appeared on Jack's tired face. Finally, he reached for a cookie, nibbling on it slowly. "I'm sure you have a lot of questions," Robert commented casually, watching the boys' reactions. Jack paused, chewing for a moment, his shoulders stiffening. Are you gonna call the police?" "Not yet," Robert reassured him calmly. "But I need to know what happened so I can help you all in the best way." The boy stayed quiet for so long that Robert thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a tiny voice, he said, "Mommy told me to take care of them." Robert felt his heart clench. "Your mom, where is she now?" "She," Jack swallowed, tears filling his eyes. "She got really sick. She said she was going to the hospital, but..." His voice broke. "When was that?" "3 days ago. Maybe 4. I don't know." Jack hugged his knees. "She promised to come back soon, but..." From inside the crib, one of the twins stirred, letting out a small whimper. Jack immediately straightened, alert. "Shh, Sophie. It's okay," he whispered. Then, turning to Robert, "Sarah always wakes up first. Sophie takes a bit longer." Robert froze. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. Sarah, a flash of memory, a young blonde woman laughing as she twirled in the snow, her eyes shining with happiness. "You work too hard, Robbie. You have to live a little." His younger sister. The last time he'd seen her. Your mum," Robert forced the words through the lump in his throat. "Her name was Sarah." Jack looked at him with innocent eyes. "Yeah, Sarah Thompson." The world seemed to stop spinning. Robert gripped the arms of the chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. His voice came out hoarse. He cleared his throat. She had a brother, right? Uncle Robbie. Jack brightened. Mom always talked about him. She said he was a doctor, really important. She had a picture of him on the living room table. But his smile vanished. We had to leave that apartment when we ran out of money. Every word felt like a knife twisting in Robert's chest. He stood up suddenly and went to the window. He needed a moment to pull himself together. You don't understand, Robbie. I love him. Why can't you accept it? He's a swindler, Sarah. He's going to break your heart. The only one breaking my heart right now is you. A door slamming, snow falling, and then silence. Years of silence. Are you okay? Jack's worried voice brought Robert back to the present. Robert took a deep breath and turned to the boy, his nephew. Jack, he said softly, did your mom ever mention where her brother went? She said. Jack furrowed his brow as he tried to remember. She said he lived in a big mansion because the family had lots of money, but we couldn't go there because we hesitated. Because why? Because they'd had a fight. About my dad. Jack lowered his gaze. Mom would cry sometimes, looking at Uncle Robbie's photo. But then Dad left, and everything got harder, and in the crib, Sarah, the baby, started a soft, mewling cry. Jack immediately hopped off the armchair, but his weak legs nearly gave out. Robert caught him before he fell. For a moment they stood there, this small boy leaning against him, looking up at him with a mix of gratitude and fear. Jack, Robert said, his voice trembling slightly, I think I have something to tell you. The boy tilted his head, curious. In the crib, baby Sarah kept crying, and Sophie began to stir as well. Margaret arrived at the doorway with 2 fresh bottles, as if she had a sixth sense about when the babies needed feeding. Robert looked at the twins, his grandnieces, and then back at Jack. Now that he knew what to look for, the boy's face had all of Sarah's unmistakable traits. How had he not realized it before? Your mom, he began carefully, was right about her brother living in a mansion. He really does. He paused, letting the next words carry weight. This mansion. Jack's eyes widened, slow comprehension spreading across his young features. You're... Robert nodded, feeling tears sting at the corners of his eyes for the first time in many years. Yes, Jack. I'm your Uncle Robbie. The boy was still for a long moment, processing. Then, with the disarming directness of a 5-year-old, he asked, Are you going to help us find Mom? Robert felt his heart break and heal at the same time. He knelt down in front of his nephew, placing his hands on the boy's thin shoulders. I will, Jack, I promise I will. And I promise, too, that no matter what happens, you and your sisters will never be cold or hungry again. His voice grew steadier. You're home now. Jack watched him for a moment, as if testing the truth of those words. Then, without warning, he threw his arms around Robert's neck and started to cry. Not the choked sobs from the night before, but deep tears of someone who had finally found a place safe enough to let the pain out. Robert hugged him back, feeling his own tears flow. In the crib, the twins cried in unison with their brother, as though understanding the importance of this moment. And outside, the first rays of sunlight finally broke through the storm clouds, as if the sky itself recognized that a long-lost family was finally beginning to find one another again. Robert remained in his office for a long time, staring at an untouched glass of brandy on the desk. His eyes were fixed on an old photograph, a young blonde woman smiling at the camera, snow drifting gently around her. Sarah, his sister. Jack's words still echoed in his mind. Mommy is really sick, Uncle Robbie. She couldn't even get out of bed the last day. His fingers gripped the frame so tightly his knuckles turned white. You can't marry him, Sarah. He only wants our money. You don't even know him, Robbie. Why can't you trust my judgment for once? Because you're too young, too naive. You're not seeing what's right in front of you. The memory of their last fight hit like a punch to the gut. Sarah, only 19, tears running down her face as she yelled that she hated him. He, so sure of his older brother righteousness, a respected doctor, the guardian of the family fortune. Sir? Margaret's voice pulled him back to the present. The children have eaten and gone back to sleep. But there's something you need to see. She placed a small, tattered notebook on his desk. I found it in the boy's backpack while washing his clothes. Robert opened the notebook with trembling hands. It was a diary, filled with Sarah's familiar handwriting. Dear Diary, 136. The doctor said the treatment is too expensive. I tried calling Robbie again today, but I lost the nerve when someone answered. How can I ask for help after all this time? After he turned out to be right about Thomas all along. The twins are growing so fast. Jack is my little angel, always trying to help, but it's getting harder and harder to hide just how sick I am. The date at the top of the page was only 3 months old. Robert closed his eyes, feeling nauseated. You'll regret this, Sarah. He's going to break your heart. The only one breaking my heart is you. A door slamming, the sound of footsteps in the snow, and he, idiotically proud, never going after her. Margaret, he said in a rough voice, call Dr. Chen. Tell him I need every hospital in the city checked right now. I want to know where my sister is being treated. Right away, sir. Margaret hesitated in the doorway. And the children. Robert glanced again at Sarah's photo. Now he could see it clearly. Jack had the same eyes, the same determined smile. Their family, he said firmly. My family. Get the upstairs rooms ready. The best ones. And make a list of everything we need to buy. Clothes, toys, furniture. I've already started on that, sir. She offered a gentle smile. I knew you would want to take good care of them. After she left, Robert reopened the diary. Jack asked about Uncle Robbie today. I showed him the only photo I kept, that one from Christmas, before everything went wrong. He said the uncle looked nice. If he only knew. It hurt so much to know my children may never meet my brother, the Robbie I grew up with, who used to take me ice skating and defend me from bullies, not the bitter man who kicked me out that night. Robert let the diary slip from his fingers, his hands shaking too badly to keep hold of it. Guilt consumed him like acid. He had done this. His pride, his arrogance, his certainty that he knew best, had left his sister alone when she needed him the most. And now she was somewhere, very sick, maybe even die. No, he couldn't bear that thought. A soft cry drew his attention. He got up and opened his office door quietly. In the next room, Jack sat among the twins, making up a story to calm them. And then the prince rescued the princess, and they lived happily ever after, the child's voice said. Just like Mommy said it'll be when she comes back. Robert felt something inside him shatter. He walked into the room, kneeling next to the bed. Jack, he said gently. I'm sorry. The boy looked at him, confused. For what, Uncle? For not being there. For not helping your mom when she needed it. His voice wavered. For being too proud to admit I was wrong. But, Jack frowned, thinking, you're here now. And you're going to help us find Mommy, right? Robert pulled him into a tight hug, feeling warm tears trail down his cheeks. Yes, Jack, I promise. I'll find your mom and I'll fix everything I messed up. He pulled back slightly, looking into the boy's eyes, Sarah's eyes. And no matter what happens, you three will never be alone again. Sarah and Sophie, as if sensing the moment's importance, went silent. The quiet that fell over the room was heavy with unspoken promises and new hopes. Robert looked at the 3 children, his nieces and nephew, his own flesh and blood, and silently swore to dedicate the rest of his life to making up for the lost years. Somewhere in the city, his younger sister needed him, and this time, he wouldn't make her wait. Dr. Thompson, this is from Central Hospital, a tired-sounding voice said on the other end of the phone. I'm sorry, but there's no record of a patient named Sarah Thompson in the last 2 weeks. Robert crossed another hospital name off his list, hands trembling slightly. It was the 4th hospital he'd checked that morning. What about unidentified admissions? Anyone matching the description I gave? No, sir, I'm sorry. He hung up with more force than intended. His office, usually a haven of order and calm, was a chaotic mess of scattered papers and half-finished cups of coffee. Sir? Margaret knocked softly. Dr. Chen is on line 2. He says he has information. Robert seized the phone like a lifeline. Chen had been his favorite resident back in his surgical days. Now he headed the largest private hospital in the city. James, what have you got? Rob? Chen sounded hesitant, making Robert's stomach churn. I found some consultations on file. Sarah came into our clinic about a month ago. The tests... A pause. You need to see them in person. I'm on my way. Wait. Chen cleared his throat. There's more. She never came back to get her results. The social worker tried to reach her, but the address she left behind, it was vacated. Robert closed his eyes, guilt welling up again. How many times had Sarah been forced to move? How many times had she struggled alone, while he lived comfortably in a mansion? A soft sound by the door caught his attention. Jack stood there, still in pajamas, hugging a teddy bear Margaret had bought that morning. Jack. Robert tried to speak more gently. You can't sleep. The boy shook his head. The twins are sleeping, but... He hesitated. Are you looking for Mommy? Yes, I am. Robert waved him over. Want to help? The boy's eyes, so much like Sarah's, brightened. He ran forward and climbed onto Robert's lap. Jack, Robert began carefully, do you remember which hospital your mum said she was going to? It was... The boy frowned in concentration. Near that park with the broken carousel. Mommy always got sad when we walked by it. Robert exchanged a quick glance with Margaret, who was already jotting down notes. And did you guys live near there? No, we had to leave because the landlord wanted his apartment back. Jack squeezed the teddy bear tighter. But I know where it is. There's an ice cream place on the corner that sells blue ice cream. Mommy never let me have any because it was too expensive. Each detail of Sarah's precarious life was like another knife to Robert's heart. He swallowed hard. That helps a lot, buddy. Anything else you remember? Huh, Jack bit his lip, just like Sarah used to do. Oh, there was a really nice lady at the hospital. She'd let us stay in her office when it rained too much. The office had all these papers with numbers on them. A social worker, Margaret murmured. Do you remember her name? It was something like a flower. Rose? No. Jasmine. That's it. Robert was already dialing again. Chen, I need to talk to a social worker named Jasmine, right now. 15 minutes later, they had a name and a phone number. Jasmine Flores had been following Sarah's case for weeks, building trust until Sarah vanished. Mr. Thompson. The voice on the line was calm yet professional. Yes, I knew Sarah. She... Another pause. May I ask your relationship to her? I'm her brother, Robert forced out, the words bitter with regret. The brother who wasn't there when I should have been. Something in his voice must have convinced Jasmine, because her tone shifted completely. Sarah is very sick, Mr. Thompson. Advanced leukemia. She refused to be admitted because she had no one to watch the children. We tried to arrange help, but she was afraid they'd separate the family. Robert felt Jack tense in his lap. He forced himself to breathe, gently stroking his nephew's hair. Where is she now? The last address I have is a boarding house on the east side. But that was 5 days ago. When I went back there yesterday, they'd already rented the room to someone else. Robert wrote the address with a trembling hand. I'll find her, even if I have to turn this city upside down. Mr. Thompson. Jasmine's voice grew even gentler. She talked about you. During the consultations with us when she was feeling vulnerable, she said her biggest regret was not trying to fix things with her brother before she got too sick. The tears Robert had been fighting against finally slipped free. Jack, sensing his distress, hugged him. Don't cry, Uncle, he whispered. We're gonna find Mommy. She's strong, like a superhero. Robert squeezed him back, amazed at the child's strength. 5 years old, and already he knew how to comfort adults. Margaret, he called, voice regaining firmness. Get the car ready. Jack's going to show us where that park is. Right now, the boy's eyes widened. Right now. But first, Robert allowed himself a small smile. How about we stop by that ice cream place you mentioned? I think it's time you tried that blue ice cream. Jack's eyes sparkled, then grew worried again. But what about the twins? Alan will look after them, and we'll bring back some ice cream for when they wake up. Robert stood, determined. We've got an important mission, you and me. Let's bring your mum home. While Margaret helped Jack change, Robert looked again at Sarah's photo on his desk, his little sister smiling in the snow, young and full of life. "Forgive me," he whispered to the image. "I'm coming, Sarah. Just hold on." Outside, the sun was setting. Somewhere in the city, his sister was fighting a terrible illness, but not for much longer. This time, Robert Thompson would not let pride get in the way of family love. This time, he wouldn't rest until Sarah was home. The corridor at St. Luke's Hospital seemed endless. Robert rushed forward, carrying Sophie in his left arm while Jack clutched his right hand. Margaret followed closely, carrying baby Sarah, who was dozing contentedly in her arms. The phone call had come less than an hour ago. A nurse who recognized Sarah's description from the dozens of flyers Robert had posted around the city. "Room 412, he muttered, scanning the room numbers in a blur. 410. 411. Jack squeezed his hand harder. "Uncle, what if Mom doesn't want to see me? I promised to look after the twins, but..." Robert stopped and knelt down, ignoring the protest in his knees. "Listen, buddy, you took better care of your sisters than any adult could have. She's going to be so proud of you. But I brought them to your house and she said we shouldn't." 412, Margaret said softly behind them. Robert stood, his heart pounding. The door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, he spotted a pale figure on the bed, hooked to tubes and monitors. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound cutting through the silence. Jack let go of Robert's hand and dashed inside before anyone could stop him. "Mommy!" The figure on the bed stirred. A faint, raspy voice, yet still carrying that familiar musical lilt Robert remembered, said, "Jack, honey, is that you?" Robert stepped in, still holding Sophie, with Margaret right behind, carrying the other baby. For a moment, everything seemed suspended in time. Sarah was so thin, her once shiny blonde hair was just a few frail strands. But her eyes, the ones Jack had, still sparkled with that defiant light she'd always had. "My babies," she cried softly as Jack scrambled onto the bed to hug her. "All of you. You're safe." Then her gaze fell on Robert. "Robbie." The single word came out like a sigh, as if she was afraid he might disappear if she spoke any louder. "Hey, Sarah," he managed, voice breaking. "I'm sorry I took so long." She tried to sit up, but the tubes and her own weakness stopped her. Jack automatically adjusted the pillows behind her, a gesture so familiar it made Robert's heart ache. How many times had this 5-year-old cared for his sick mother? The twins, Sarah reached out with shaky arms. Robert and Margaret moved closer, gently placing the babies on the bed. Sarah sobbed, touching her daughters' faces. "They've grown. It's only been a few weeks, but..." "They're doing great," Robert said in a low voice. "Jack took amazing care of them. He even took care of you, from what I've seen." Sarah held her son's hand. He'd settled himself on the hospital bed by her side. "My little hero." Then to Robert, How did you find them?" "They found me," Robert admitted, sitting on the bed's edge. "Showed up on my doorstep in the biggest snowstorm of the year." Sarah's eyes widened. She looked at Jack, who dropped his gaze. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know you said never to bother Uncle Robbie, but it was so cold and the twins were crying and..." "Shh." Sarah pulled him close, kissing his forehead. "You did exactly the right thing, my love. Exactly what you needed to do." Robert watched them, a lump in his throat. How foolish he'd been years ago. Sarah wasn't that headstrong 19-year-old anymore. She was a mother, an incredible one. "Sarah," he began quietly, "why didn't you come to me when you got sick?" She avoided his gaze, still stroking Jack's hair. "After everything. After you were right about Thomas." "How could I?" "How could you?" Robert echoed, feeling his throat tighten. "You're my sister. My only sister. I'm the one who had no right to let my stupid pride keep us apart." A monitor beeped more quickly. Sarah started coughing, a violent spasm shaking her frail body. Robert quickly reached for a cup of water, helping her drink. "How long?" he asked after the coughing subsided. "How long have you been hiding this?" "About 8 months, she admitted weakly. "At first I thought it was just exhaustion, with the twins so small and Jack to care for. By the time I realized how serious it was..." She swallowed hard. Treatment costs so much, and I couldn't risk them taking my children away. Robert closed his eyes, each word stabbing him. Well, he said firmly, that ends now. You're getting treatment, top specialists, top facilities. And your kids will be looked after because they'll be with family. Our family. Sarah stared at him for a long moment, tears shimmering in her eyes. Robbie, she began, but was interrupted by another coughing fit. This time, it was worse. An alarm started beeping, and nurses rushed into the room. Robert scooped Jack into his arms, pulling him away from the bed while the medical team jumped into action. Mummy, Jack's small voice trembled. It's all right, buddy. Robert tried to stay calm, though panic clenched his chest. They know what to do. Margaret had already taken the twins, who began crying, unsettled by the commotion. Dr. Thompson, one of the nurses said, approaching. We need you to wait outside for a few minutes. Robert nodded and left, carrying Jack into the hallway. The boy clung to him, shaking. She's going to be okay, right, Uncle? He asked in a small, desperate voice. Like in the stories she used to tell me? With a happy ending, Robert held his nephew tighter, glancing through the window as the nurses and doctors worked around his sister. Yes, Jack, he promised, silently praying it was true. This time, we'll get our happy ending. Inside, monitors beeped steadily, flashing like red stars in the hospital night. And Robert Thompson, for the first time in many years, closed his eyes and prayed. The hospital room was quiet in the early morning hours. Margaret had taken the children home after Sarah stabilized, promising to bring them back later. Robert stayed, sitting in the chair beside his sister's bed, watching the dawn break through the window. Sarah dozed now, calmer after the medications. The deep circles under her eyes hinted at many sleepless nights, countless worries no mother should bear alone. You still furrow your brow when you're worried, came Sarah's weak voice, surprising him. Just like when we were kids, Robert tried to smile, but it wavered. And you still pretend to sleep so you can watch other people. Some things don't change. Others do, Sarah said softly, trying to sit up. Robert stood and gently helped her. Look at us. We needed a tragedy to bring us back together. Sarah. He held her hand, alarmed at how fragile she felt. Why didn't you call me? Right when you got sick. She glanced away, staring at the window. You were right about Thomas, you know, about everything. None of that matters now. It does. Her voice grew stronger. You warned me. You said he only wanted our money and would leave me at the first problem. And that's what happened. A tear rolled down her cheek. When I found out I was pregnant with the twins, he disappeared. Robert felt the old anger flare, but he pushed it down. Rage wouldn't help. I thought about you every day, Sarah continued. When the bills piled up, when I had to move to tiny apartments. But how could I go back? How could I admit you were right? What about me? Robert's voice trembled. How could I let my pride outweigh my love for my only sister? I should have gone after you. I should have... We both made mistakes, Sarah said, eyes gentle. I was young, stubborn, thought I knew everything. I was a controlling jerk, thinking I could decide your life for you. A small smile curved Sarah's lips. At least you admit it now. They both chuckled, a tentative, shaky laugh as though they had to relearn how to laugh together. Jack is incredible, Robert observed after a pause. How did you manage, Sarah? 3 kids on your own, being sick. Her face lit up at the mention of her children. Jack, he grew up so fast. Sometimes I forget he's only 5. And the twins. Her voice cracked. They were so tiny when I really started getting worse. I was afraid I wouldn't see them grow. Hey, Robert squeezed her hand. Don't talk like that. We'll get the best doctors, the best treatment. Robbie, she bit her lip, just like she used to as a child. I don't know if there's time. The doctors said, I don't care what they said. You're a Thompson and we're too stubborn to quit. Sarah gave a fragile smile. Like the time you broke your arm but kept playing baseball anyway. Or when you had chickenpox but insisted on dancing in your ballet recital. Laughter filled the space between them, bringing back memories and bridging the years of silence. Robert noted that he still recognized her every expression, every inflection of her voice, even though there were new lines of worry on her face now. "You know what scared me most," Sarah said quietly. "Not the sickness, or even the thought of—" She couldn't say it, but wondering what would happen to my kids if anything happened to me. "They'd be separated, sent to different foster homes." "That won't happen," Robert said firmly. "They're family, my family, our family." "Even though they're his kids?" Sarah asked, voice trembling. "They're yours, Sarah, and that makes them mine too." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Jack asked about you all the time. I showed him our last Christmas picture. He always said you looked cool, that he'd like to meet his Uncle Robbie one day." "Now he has," Robert replied with a sad smile. "And from what I've seen, he inherited your stubbornness, braving a snowstorm carrying 2 babies. Definitely a Thompson." Sarah laughed, then coughed painfully. Robert gave her water and waited for her breathing to steady. "Sorry," she whispered. "I'm just so sorry, for not trusting you, for being so proud." "No," Robert interrupted her. "I'm the one who's sorry. I didn't come after you when you needed me most. Let years pass without searching. I failed you as a brother." "But you're here now," Sarah insisted, taking his hand. "That's what matters." A gentle sunbeam crept through the window, casting the room in soft gold. Robert studied his sister, so different from the fiery girl who slammed the door all those years ago, yet so much the same Sarah he'd promised to protect since she was a baby. "Let's make a deal," he said softly. "No more pride, no more secrets. From now on, we face everything together, as a family." Sarah smiled, and for an instant, he saw the girl she'd once been, cheerful, brave, free. "As a family," she agreed. Robert stared at the scattered documents on his desk. Each page revealed a fresh horror. Old medical files, half-finished police reports, hospital records describing ominous signs of abuse. "Mr. Thompson?" David Chen, his trusted lawyer, spoke quietly. "There's one more file you need to see." Another paper slid across the table, a black and white photograph from 3 years ago. Sarah on a hospital stretcher, bruises marring her face. The date lined up with the earliest stage of her twin pregnancy. Robert closed his eyes, hands shaking with barely contained anger. Why didn't she? "Survivors rarely report abuse the first time," David replied gently. "And even if they do, they often withdraw the complaint because of fear or manipulation." Outside, Robert could hear Jack's laughter as he played with his sisters in the mansion's garden. The innocent sound clashed with the ugly truth on these pages. "Where is he now?" Robert asked in a low voice. "Mark Anderson disappeared about 8 months ago," David said, consulting notes. "Right after your sister found out about the pregnancy." Robert stood abruptly and walked over to the window. Jack was displaying a new toy to the babies, his face intent on making them laugh. How could a 5-year-old be this responsible, this protective? The answer was spelled out in those documents. "I want protective measures," Robert finally said, "for Sarah and the children, right now." "I'm on it," David agreed. "But Robert, your sister will have to testify. She's never officially spoken about any of this." "She will now." Robert's voice was cold. "I'm not letting that monster near my family again." A soft noise at the door made him turn. Sarah was there, looking frail in a wheelchair, Margaret standing respectfully behind her. "Sarah," Robert's heart twisted, "you should be resting." "And you should have asked me before investigating my life," she replied calmly, though a tension underlay her words. David discreetly began gathering the documents, but Sarah raised her hand. "No, leave them." She glanced at Margaret. "Would you mind giving us a moment?" Once alone, Sarah rolled closer to the desk, scanning the photos and records. "So now you know," she said in a controlled voice. "Why didn't you tell me?" Robert kneeled beside her wheelchair. "I could have helped." "I could have said I told you so," she asked with a sad smile. "That's what I was most afraid of, that you were right, not just about the money, but everything." "I never," he started. "In the beginning, he seemed different," Sarah recalled, running a shaky finger over the photo. "Or I wanted him to be different. After Jack was born, it got worse." Then when I found out about the twins, she swallowed hard. Robert clutched her hand as he felt it tremble. He just vanished, Sarah finished. And part of me was relieved, Robbie. What kind of person feels relief when the father of her children leaves? The kind who survived what you survived, Robert answered. Sarah, none of this is your fault. A tear fell on the photo. Jack saw things no child should. He tried to protect me. At age 5, her voice broke. Robert felt something snap within him. His tiny nephew, standing between his mom and a raging father. That's why he's so protective with the twins, Sarah said. Why he acts like a grown-up. I failed him, Robbie. I failed all of them. No, Robert said with conviction. You kept them safe, you kept them together. Now, he paused. Now I need you to be strong again. We have to make sure he never hurts them. Sarah's gaze traveled to the window, where Jack cuddled Sophie, humming a lullaby. What if he comes back, she whispered. Now that I'm sick, if something happens to me. Nothing is going to happen to you, Robert insisted, squeezing her hand. You'll get the right treatment, and together we'll protect these kids. But for that, he breathed in, we need everything documented, Sarah, legally. She shut her eyes, tears leaking. I'm so scared, Robbie. Not for me, for them. Jack's already seen too much. Then let me be strong now, he begged. Let me do what I should have done years ago. Let me protect my family. Sarah opened her eyes, watching her son in the garden. Jack seemed to sense her gaze and waved enthusiastically, flashing a big smile. All right, she said after a pause. I'll tell it all. For Jack, for the twins. She squeezed Robert's hand. For our family. He rose and kissed her forehead softly. I'll call David back in. And Sarah. He waited until she looked at him. Nothing will tear us apart again. Ever. Outside, Jack had resumed singing to his sisters, a childhood lullaby that Sarah had once sung to him, which their mother had sung to them. A melody passed down through generations. The past still loomed, but a new light shone on the horizon. Robert Thompson silently vowed he'd do everything in his power to keep that light alive. The oncology ward of the hospital had become a second home for the Thompson family. Robert adjusted a small blanket over Jack, who had fallen asleep on the sofa after hours beside his mother's bed. In an improvised crib, the twins slept peacefully, oblivious to the nurses' comings and goings. Sarah was in the midst of her third chemo session that week. She looked paler than usual, almost translucent. But her eyes had that fierce spark Robert recognized so well. You should take the kids home, Sarah whispered, glancing at Jack, who shifted in his sleep. This environment isn't good for them. Try telling that to Jack, Robert said with a gentle smile. He said he's the family's official protector, remember? A faint sound, half laugh, half sob, escaped Sarah's lips. He shouldn't have to be so strong at 5. He's your son, Robert teased softly, adjusting her IV. Stubbornness seems to run in Thompsons. As if to prove the point, Sophie began to fuss. Before Robert could move, Jack was up, rubbing his sleepy eyes but laser-focused on his mission. Calm down, Sophie, he murmured, leaning over the crib to stroke her hair. Uncle Robbie's taking care of Mom. Everything's gonna be fine. Robert's heart clenched. In just a few weeks, he'd learned Jack had a sixth sense for his sisters. He knew their different cries and daily rhythms better than any adult. She's hungry, Jack declared with the certainty of an expert. And in a minute, Sarah's gonna wake up wanting a bottle, too. Right on cue, Margaret slipped into the room, carrying 2 prepared bottles. She'd practically moved in, taking shifts with Alan to care for the kids. Here you go, my little man. She handed Jack the bottles, which he promptly began using to feed Sophie. I can, Robert began, but Jack shook his head. You have to stay with Mom, he said seriously. I'll look after my sisters. Sarah closed her eyes, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Robert clasped her hand gently. Hey, no tears, he whispered. You need your strength for treatment. It's just... She swallowed, watching Jack soothe Sophie with a surprising adeptness for a 5-year-old. I keep wondering how much of his childhood he lost because of me. Sarah. He should be out playing, making a mess, not acting like a mini-adult. Almost as if he heard, Jack glanced up from feeding Sophie. "Mom, don't cry. Look, Sophie's almost asleep. Want to see her smile? She always smiles when I sing that song." Without waiting for an answer, he began humming the lullaby Sarah used to sing for him. His childish voice, off-key in places, filled the room with a sweet warmth that made it hard not to cry. "See?" he said proudly as Sophie gave a tiny sigh. "Now Sarah's waking up too. She'll want her bottle soon." Indeed, the other twin was stirring. Jack expertly swapped the bottles. It was like watching someone who'd been doing this for years. Robert marveled at his nephew's calm efficiency under such grim circumstances, but he also noticed the signs, those tired eyes, the tense shoulders. "Jack," he called softly, "how about tomorrow we try that new puzzle, while Margaret looks after your sisters?" The boy's face lit up, but concern crept back quickly. "But what about Mom?" "I'll still be here," Sarah reassured him, though she looked exhausted. "And I'd love to see you work on that puzzle. It'll give me something fun to watch while I'm stuck with these meds." Jack considered it seriously. "Okay," he agreed at last, "but the twins should be nearby too. They like looking at the puzzle pieces." Robert shared a look with Sarah, equal parts pride and heartbreak. Jack was both the most mature and the most needy child he'd ever met. The day played out as hospital days do, with nurses checking vitals and doctors reviewing charts. Margaret and Alan took turns with the routine tasks, but at the center of it was that small family, leaning on each other through every hour. That night, after Sarah finally fell asleep, Robert watched Jack nod off too, a storybook resting on his lap. The twins slept soundly, evidently sensing they were safe in their brother's love. "They'll be okay," Margaret whispered, placing a cup of coffee next to Robert. "All of them." Robert nodded, a new resolve in his chest. Sarah would beat this, and Jack would get to be a kid again, carefree, because at last they were all together. Thompsons never give up on each other. The sound of children's laughter echoed in the hospital corridor, an unlikely, hopeful noise in a sterile place. Robert paused at the door, taking in the scene. Jack sat on the bed next to Sarah, with the twins propped on pillows between them, as Sarah told a story apparently hilarious enough to make them all laugh. "Shike, and that's when you decided to swim in the oatmeal." Sarah gestured dramatically, her cheeks colored with a healthy flush. "I'd never seen such a mess in my life." "Mom," Jack squealed, though his eyes shone with delight at her good spirits. "Don't tell the twins that. They'll think they can do the same." "But they're already a lot better behaved than you ever were," Sarah teased, kissing the top of his head. "Right, my little princesses," Sophie cooed happily, while baby Sarah tried to grab her brother's hair. Robert felt warmth fill his chest. The treatment was working, slowly but steadily. The latest test showed hopeful signs. There was still a long way to go, but the outlook was brighter. "Uncle Robbie!" Jack spotted him at the doorway. "Come hear these stories too. Mom's telling about when I was a baby." "Oh yeah," Robert entered, settling into the armchair near the bed. "I've got a few stories about your mom as a kid too." "Don't you dare, Robert Thompson." Sarah tossed a pillow at him, narrowly missing. "Why not?" He grinned mischievously. Jack should know how his mom gave her favorite doll a haircut, and then cut her own hair too. "Really, Mom?" Jack's eyes widened. "I was 4, Sarah laughed. "And Robbie swore never to tell that story." "Sibling promises expire," Robert quipped, making Jack laugh until he nearly cried. Incredible how things had changed. In the early days of treatment, joy was rare. Now it was an almost daily occurrence. Jack had been crucial to that shift. His constant presence, big heart and unflagging optimism even in hardship, provided a backbone of courage for everyone. "Did you know your uncle used to protect me from all the bullies at school?" Sarah reminisced, smoothing Sophie's hair. "He was my hero." Robert felt a pang of guilt. "I sure wasn't heroic these past few years." "But you are now," Sarah said. Extending her hand, he took it without hesitation. "That's what counts." Jack looked on, thoughtful. "Like I protect the twins?" "Exactly the same," Robert nodded. "Must be a Thompson thing." "Speaking of family," Sarah said with a pointed cough, exchanging a quick look with Robert. "Jack, remember that big room at the end of the hallway in the mansion? The one you said would make a perfect playroom?" The boy's eyes lit up. Yeah, it has a big window that looks out at the garden. Well, Robert picked up the conversation. When your mom's discharged, which should be soon if things keep improving, how about we actually turn that room into just that? A special place for you and your sisters to play. Jack froze, pondering. You mean we'd live with you, all of us? If you want to, Robert replied softly. That mansion's too big for just one person. And besides, he smiled. Now I can't imagine it without you and the twins. To his surprise, Jack didn't beam right away. Instead, he cast a sidelong look at his mom, as if seeking permission. It's your choice too, sweetheart, Sarah said gently. Do you like the idea? Can we paint it blue? Jack asked finally, eyes brightening. That's the twins' favorite color. They always love looking at the sky when it's blue. Robert felt a tear threaten. Even at a time like this, Jack put his sisters first. We can paint it however you want, he assured, and maybe you can help me pick out some toys. I'm a bit out of practice when it comes to buying toys for little kids. Jack smiled then, a radiant grin. I can help. I know exactly what the twins like, and... He paused shyly. Could we also put some books? I like reading to them. Jack, Robert said, leaning forward, that'll be your home. You and your sisters can have as many books as you like. Sarah watched silently, tears of happiness glistening. Seeing her son finally behave like the 5-year-old he was, talking about playrooms and books, was a gift she hadn't expected this soon. And you know, Jack added thoughtfully, I think the twins will like living there. Lots of space for them to learn to crawl. And that garden? His eyes shone. Could we have picnics, like in the stories Mum told me? Every day, Robert promised. And when your mum's strong enough, we can even build a treehouse. A treehouse, Jack breathed, starry-eyed. Hey, I want a treehouse too, Sarah teased, eliciting laughter from everyone. Sensing the joy, the twins started babbling, clapping their hands. Their happy sounds formed a sweet little choir. And there, in that hospital room that had seen so many tears, a once-broken family finally felt whole, both physically and emotionally. Robert gazed at his sister, stronger every day, at his nephew, who was letting himself be a child, at his twin nieces, thriving on the love around them. He knew deep down that some ties are too strong to break forever. Sometimes they just need time and love to reconnect. The next morning began normally at the hospital. Sarah felt well enough to sit up for breakfast on her own. Jack had just fed the twins and was proudly holding up a new drawing, a sketch of the whole family in the mansion's garden. The sound of footsteps in the corridor didn't stand out at first. Doctors and nurses walked these halls all the time, but something about this group, crisp, measured footsteps, put Robert on edge. He noticed before anyone else that something was off. His years in medicine had sharpened his senses. When the door swung open, his protective instinct kicked in immediately. 2 women in professional suits entered first, files in hand, faces carefully neutral. But it was the third person who made Robert's blood freeze. Mark Anderson. The man wore a perfect suit, a polished smile that never reached his cold eyes. He radiated confidence, something Robert instantly loathed. A bottle dropped to the floor with a loud clang. Jack had frozen in place, his small body visibly shaking. "Dad?" came the boy's fearful whisper. Sarah clutched the bed sheets until her knuckles turned white. "Marka, what are you doing here?" "Sarah, darling," he said, voice soft and almost hypnotic. "I came as soon as I heard you were ill. Why didn't you tell me? Why hide our children from me?" Robert stepped forward, shielding the family behind him. "Ladies," he addressed the suited women, keeping an even tone. "How can I help you?" The older woman spoke first. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Patricia Wells from Child Protective Services, and this is my colleague Amanda Carter. We received a report, Robert cut in. His mind was already shifting into defensive mode. "Yes, about the children's welfare," Mark explained smoothly. "As their father, it's my right to be concerned. 3 little kids, a mother hospitalized." A muffled cry came from Jack, who backed away until he was almost pressed against the twins' crib, looking at his father with sheer terror. "Jack," Sarah called, voice trembling, "come here, sweetie." But Jack didn't move. Instead, he edged closer to the twins, putting himself protectively in front of them. Mark gave a predatory smile. "Look at that. My own son doesn't even want to hug me. What kind of lies have they been telling you about me, Sarah?" "Only the truth," Robert said, his voice sharper than intended. He turned to the social workers. "Ladies, I have extensive documentation of this situation, including Sarah's prior hospital records." Patricia Wells scanned her folder. "Yes, I see we do have a record of incidents." "Misunderstandings," Mark dismissed with a flick of his hand. "What's crucial now is the children's best interests. Sarah is clearly incapacitated, and with all due respect," he shot Robert a measuring glance, "a bachelor uncle, always at work. No experience with kids." "No!" Jack's shout startled everyone. "You're not taking them away. You're not going to hurt them." Mark took a step, but Robert was quicker, blocking him. "I strongly suggest you keep your distance," he warned, voice low and menacing. "Are you threatening me, Dr. Thompson?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "In front of Child Protective Services." "Mr. Anderson," Amanda Carter interjected. "Please stay back. We need to assess the situation carefully." Sarah, mustering her strength, sat up straighter. "My children have everything they need. My brother—" "Your current health raises serious concerns," Patricia Wells said, checking her notes. "Advanced leukemia, repeated hospitalization." "Exactly why I'm here," Mark interrupted with a humble gesture. "As their father, it's my duty." "Father," Jack's voice trembled but held an unexpected bravery. "Fathers don't make Mom cry. Fathers don't hurt." Mark advanced another step, his face hardening momentarily. "Son, you're confused. Clearly your mother's been filling your head with nonsense." Robert felt his self-control wearing thin. "One more step," he said quietly, "and you'll see some Thompson family traditions I'd hoped never to use again." "Gentlemen," Patricia Wells called out, "that's enough. This is not the way." But it was Jack who ended the exchange. "He's lying," the boy said simply, pointing at his father. "Like he always lied, saying Mom fell down the stairs, or that he loved me, but then he hurt us." The silence was deafening. Amanda Carter cleared her throat, reviewing her folder. "Dr. Thompson, can you describe the living conditions you have for the children?" Robert drew himself up. "I've renovated an entire wing of my mansion for them. They have their own rooms, a play area, full medical coverage, psychological support, but most importantly," he looked at Jack, then at Sarah, "they have love, family, safety." "What about your job, your responsibilities?" Patricia asked. "I've reduced my hours. Margaret and Alan, who've worked for me for 15 years, are like family and can help," and he hesitated. "I'm learning every day, learning to be an uncle, to be a family." Wells and Carter exchanged thoughtful looks. "All right," Wells began, "from the evidence—" "This is insane," Mark blurted, stepping forward with open anger in his face now. "They're my children. My blood." "Blood?" Sarah spoke up, voice weak but fierce. "The only blood I saw was on my face the night you beat me, or on my son's hands when he tried to protect me." A heavy silence followed. Through the window, they could faintly hear one of the twins begin to wail, as if sensing the tension. "Jack," Sarah continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My 5-year-old boy, forced to stand between me and we'd like to hear from the boy," Patricia cut in gently. "Jack, could you step over here for a moment?" The child did so, though his legs shook. He stood at Robert's side, refusing to go near Mark. "Jack, me," Amanda Carter spoke kindly. "Tell us about the night you and your mom left your old home." Jack swallowed hard and glanced at Sarah. She nodded encouragingly. "Mom was crying a lot," he began quietly. "She had blood on her face. She said we had to be very quiet, like hiding. She could barely walk, but she said we had to leave before—" He stopped. Mark huffed. "He's just a kid. You can't trust—" "Mr. Anderson," Wells snapped. "Let the boy speak. When he finally fell asleep, Mom got me and a bag of clothes. We had to be quick. We left everything else behind. She said if we tried to go to Uncle Robbie, Dad would hurt him too." Jack looked down. I wanted to find Uncle Robbie, because Mom had a picture and always said he was nice, but... Robert closed his eyes, willing away tears. Sarah stifled a sob. We moved a lot after that, Jack continued. Mom tried to get help, but... The boy's lip quivered. She got sicker, and when the twins were born, everything got harder. We ran out of money, and sometimes there wasn't any food. She said we had to keep running, or Dad would... He fell silent, tears forming. Robert gently rested a hand on his shoulder. Jack, Wells said softly, thank you for telling us. You've been very brave. Amanda Carter looked over the files again, lips pressed tight. We have hospital records, police logs, and now the child's testimony. This is preposterous, Mark shouted, face twisted with fury. I have rights. I won't stand for this. Rights, Robert said, in a calm, icy tone. You forfeited those when you abandoned your family and beat them. The twins' crying grew louder, and Jack quickly moved to the crib, singing that lullaby once more. It was heartbreakingly tender. At this point, Patricia Wells declared, the best interest of the children is to remain with Mrs. Thompson, under Dr. Thompson's care, pending further investigation. Mark stepped forward in rage, but a security guard, summoned by the raised voices, blocked him. This isn't over, Mark hissed. None of you have seen the last of me. Robert looked at his sister and nephew, at the wailing babies. Enough was enough. He squared his shoulders. You're right about one thing. It isn't over, but we'll face it as a family. Mark shot him a murderous glare before turning on his heel and storming out, the CPS workers hurrying after him, exchanging worried looks. Sarah collapsed against the pillows, trembling as Jack continued to hum for the twins. Robert surveyed them, this fragile mother who'd endured so much, this brave boy forced to grow up too soon, these innocent twin girls who deserved a happy childhood, and he made an unspoken vow. Money or no money, Mark might have power, but Robert had something stronger. He had love, and for that he'd move mountains. The hospital conference room felt too small to contain so much tension. On one side of the long table sat Mark Anderson, leaning back in his chair, exuding cold confidence. On the other, Robert stood behind Sarah's wheelchair, his hands on her shoulders protectively. At the head of the table were Patricia Wells and Amanda Carter, folders stacked in front of them. In a small adjacent room visible through a glass panel, Jack entertained the twins with Margaret watching. Let's begin, Wells said, adjusting her glasses. Mrs. Thompson, can you explain why you left your home with the children? Sarah inhaled, her fingers trembling on her lap. Robert squeezed her shoulders gently. It was a Wednesday, she started. I just found out I was expecting twins. Mark had been gone for days, like he often was. When he came back, her voice faltered. Mark made an impatient sound, but Amanda Carter gave Sarah an encouraging nod. He was drunk, Sarah continued, voice steadier now. Angry that I'd spent money from his savings to take Jack to the doctor. He had a high fever. Mark said I was wasting his money on worthless brats. Objection, Mark's lawyer shouted. She's clearly... Mr. Peterson, Wells cut in. This isn't a court of law, and we're hearing all sides. He started breaking things, Sarah went on, tears in her eyes. Jack was in the bedroom, but he heard it all. Mark came at me. I was pregnant, and all I could think was protecting my baby girls. Robert clenched his fists, fighting to stay calm. I locked myself in the bedroom with Jack, Sarah said, voice trembling. Mark pounded on the door for hours, yelling threats. When he finally left, we planned our escape. How convenient, Mark said with a cold sneer. Any proof of these so-called injuries? Robert laid a folder on the table. ER records from that same week, noting accidental falls. And here, Amanda Carter produced additional notes, are 3 other instances with similar injuries. We were young, Mark insisted smoothly. Sure, we had disagreements, but... Disagreements? Sarah's voice shook with rage. So you broke my arm, Mark, in front of our son. A tense hush fell over the room. Through the window, Jack's faint singing to the twins was audible, an odd contrast to the grim discussion. Jack, Sarah whispered, tears streaking her face. My poor boy has been trying to protect me since he was 3. Robert put another document on the table, a psychologist's report on Jack's trauma. We'd like to speak to the child, Wells decided. Margaret brought Jack into the main room. He stood by Robert, avoiding his father's gaze. "Hello, champion," Mark said with an overly bright smile. "Want a hug from Dad?" Jack drew back, glancing warily at Robert. "Jack," Carter said kindly, "can you describe the night your mom decided to leave home?" He looked at Sarah, who nodded. "Mom was bleeding. She told me to stay quiet. I heard him yelling, throwing stuff. She said we had to leave or he'd hurt us. He hurt her before, He swallowed, eyes brimming with tears. "Mr. Anderson," Mark's lawyer interrupted, "this is emotional manipulation." "Quiet," Wells said, shooting him a stern look. "Let the boy speak." "We waited until he fell asleep." Jack's voice was small. "Mom could barely walk, but she said we had to go. We only took a few clothes and Uncle Robbie's photo, because Mom said one day we might need to find him." "Why did you need to find me?" Robert asked gently. "Because Dad said he'd hurt anyone who helped us," Jack murmured, tears spilling. "But Mom said Uncle Robbie was strong and brave, and he'd protect us." Sarah choked back a sob. "So I'm so sorry, Robbie." "This is nonsense," Mark exclaimed, rising. "They're clearly coaching the child." "Mr. Anderson," Wells barked, "control yourself." "And after you left?" Carter asked Jack. "Mom got sicker. We moved around a lot. Sometimes we didn't have food." He lowered his eyes. "I'd save part of my lunch at school for her on days there wasn't dinner." Robert's heart broke anew. What child should have to learn rationing? "And when the twins were born," Sarah took over, voice trembling, "we had even less. I didn't know I was sick, just thought I was tired. But I started coughing blood. I knew I had to keep moving so Mark wouldn't find us. Jack, he never complained, just tried to help. Until you ended up on my doorstep," Robert concluded, "during the worst snowstorm of the year." "And we're here to determine their future," Wells said. "Dr. Thompson, what can you offer these children?" Robert took a deep breath. "A safe home, financial stability, medical care, and love. They're my family, and I will protect them with everything I have. And you, Mr. Anderson," Carter turned to him, "why did you disappear for 8 months?" Mark's lip curled. "Complicated business matters. I had to travel, and I left money for them. They just misused it, I'm sure." Robert reached into another file. "Bank statements showing you emptied all joint accounts before leaving. Cell records showing you tracked her through people you hired. Or is that also misunderstanding?" "Enough," Mark slammed the table. "I will not be subjected to these lies. I'm a respected businessman, and I demand. Robert's anger flared. "Like you demanded she obey you while you assaulted her. Like you demanded respect from a 5-year-old you terrorized. Gentlemen," Wells warned, "if you can't remain calm." But again, Jack's small voice silenced them. "He's lying," Jack repeated, nodding toward his father, "just like he used to lie when Mom's face was hurt. He said she fell, but I saw him push her. I saw him." A heavy quiet followed, broken only by the soft coo of one of the twins through the glass. Carter cleared her throat. "Dr. Thompson, please continue about the children's current living situation." Robert drew himself up again. "They each have their own room, a dedicated play area, full-time care from myself, Margaret, and Alan. We've spoken with a child therapist, and Jack's made progress. The twins are healthy, as is possible for 6-month-olds who've been in dire conditions. But more than that," he paused, "they're loved and wanted." "And you can't say the same about me," Mark spat. "Have you shown any interest in them before now?" Robert asked icily. "When Sarah was dying of cancer, living hand to mouth. I didn't know, she never told me." "You never asked," Sarah roared, her voice surging with emotion. "You were too busy leaving us to fend for ourselves, Mark." Wells exhaled, flipping through her notes. "Given everything, our recommendation will be to grant Mrs. Thompson custody, with Dr. Thompson as legal guardian while she undergoes treatment. Mr. Anderson, you'll be under a restraining order from coming near them." "What?" Mark lunged forward threateningly. "That's impossible." "You have no right," he snarled, eyes locked on Robert. "They're my kids." "They're Sarah's children," Robert replied, stepping between Mark and his sister. And mine to protect. Mr. Anderson, Amanda Carter said, keeping her voice as level as possible. We have enough evidence to recommend this to a judge immediately. Any further aggression on your part only strengthens the case against you. Mark glared, his chest heaving. You'll regret this, all of you. Any regrets we might have, Robert said evenly, will never outweigh the safety of these kids. Jack whimpered at Mark's rage, clinging to Robert's leg. Sarah reached out to him, and Robert gently guided the boy into her arms. That's it, Patricia Wells concluded. I'll file the paperwork. Carter, please escort Mr. Anderson out. Mark knocked his chair aside with a furious shove. This is far from over, he hissed before storming out, Carter following close behind. In the tense aftermath, Sarah let out a shaky breath, and tears started pouring down her cheeks. It's done. It's finally done. Robert knelt beside her wheelchair, reaching for Jack's hand. Not quite done. We have a lot of recovery and healing ahead, but you'll never have to face it alone again. Margaret appeared with the twins, who were beginning to fuss. Jack instinctively took over, speaking softly to soothe them, and Robert's heart clenched with love. Thank you, Sarah mouthed, unable to speak. Robert simply nodded. They were family, and that was all that mattered now. As they left the conference room, the sunlight streaming through the hospital windows felt warmer. A family that had nearly been destroyed was piecing itself back together, step by step. Robert read the court order for the third time, even though he knew every line by heart. Temporary custody granted to Sarah, with him as co-guardian. Her permanent restraining order against Mark Anderson. Legal rights affirmed, freedom at last. Outside his study, he could hear Jack's laughter bouncing along the mansion's corridor, a sound that had been unthinkable here a few weeks ago. The boy was helping Margaret decorate the twins' new room, determined that every detail be perfect. I still can't believe it, Sarah murmured from the armchair by the window. The chemo had been brutal, but she was already showing signs of improvement. Her hair was returning in a fine golden fuzz. Feels like a dream. It's real, Robert assured, slipping the papers into a folder. Just like that door you slammed on me 6 years ago. Sarah smiled sadly. I was so young, so stubborn. I was an arrogant idiot who believed I knew it all, Robert conceded, kneeling beside her. Forgive me for not being there. Only if you forgive me, she said, taking his hand. For not trusting you sooner. For letting my pride... A gleeful cry rang out. Jack burst through the door, covered in blue paint. Mom! Uncle Robbie! Come see. We finished the twins' room. Robert exchanged a grin with Sarah, then pushed her wheelchair down the hall. The room Jack had chosen for his sisters was the sunniest in the mansion, with large windows looking over the garden. The walls now had a gentle gradient of blue, like a bright summer sky. White cloud shapes decorated the ceiling's edges, Margaret's work, though some of them were clearly the product of Jack's enthusiastic painting. Look! Jack pointed proudly at 2 white cribs near the window. They can see the garden when they wake up. And here, he led them to a restored rocking chair in the corner, next to a low bookshelf lined with children's stories. This is where we can read to them, he explained matter-of-factly, and there's a baby monitor so we always know if they need something. Sarah wiped away tears. It's perfect, sweetie. There's more, Robert said, gesturing to Margaret. She brought over a long, blue-wrapped package. Jack tore it open to reveal a wooden name banner painted with Sophie and Sarah, in delicate letters. For the wall, Robert explained, so they'll always know this is their space, their home. Our home, Jack corrected quietly, hugging his uncle's waist. All of us. As if on cue, the twins started fussing from their portable cribs in the hallway. Bottle time, Jack announced and dashed to help Margaret. Robert watched his nephew proudly. In only a short time, the boy had learned to share the burdens instead of trying to carry them all alone. He was finally discovering how to be a kid again. His nightmares are less frequent, Sarah murmured, watching him. Last night was the first time he slept through without waking up in a panic. Dr. Martinez says the therapy's going well, Robert confirmed. Kids are resilient, but Jack is really special. Sarah nodded, a small shadow crossing her face. Robbie, what if Mark tries something else? Even with the restraining order, I've considered that, Robert assured. pointing to a subtle camera in the hall. State-of-the-art security, guards around the clock, safety protocols. No one will harm you again. Ever. Jack returned, carefully cradling Sophie, with Margaret holding baby Sarah. The 6-month-olds were healthier, chubbier, and smiled more often these days. "Look, Mom," Jack whispered. "Sophie's looking at the walls. She likes the color." Indeed, the baby gurgled happily at the blue walls. "You know what else?" Jack continued, setting Sophie gently on a soft rug. "Uncle Robbie promised that once you're better, we'll have picnics in the garden, and maybe a treehouse." "Really?" Sarah quirked an eyebrow at her brother. He shrugged, smiling. "A promise is a promise." They stood there, watching Jack tell a made-up story for the twins. Afternoon sunlight filled the room, making the cloud designs look almost real. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, squeezing Robert's hand. "For everything." He shook his head. "We're family." "Even so." She hesitated. "You sacrifice so much. Work, routine." "Sacrificed." Robert chuckled softly. "Sarah, for the first time in years, this house feels like a home. I have an amazing nephew who shows me new things every day, 2 nieces who bring me joy, and my little sister back. I didn't lose a thing. I gained everything." On the rug, Jack had started singing that lullaby again, blending his sweet child's voice with the birds chirping outside. The twins watched him, eyes half-lidded with sleep. Sarah leaned back in the wheelchair, truly relaxing for the first time in what felt like forever. No more sleeping with one eye open, no more constantly looking over her shoulder, no more wondering if they'd have enough for dinner. They were safe, they were home. Robert gazed at them, Sarah growing stronger every day, Jack finally embracing childhood, Sophie and little Sarah thriving in an environment of love, and felt a peace he hadn't known in a very long time. They still had a long road ahead. There were traumas to heal, trust to rebuild, painful memories to process, but they would do it together, one day at a time, one step at a time, because that's what families do. They heal, they grow, they love, and sometimes in the darkest moments, when everything seems lost, they find their way back to each other. The way it always should have been.